What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So I want to share a little bit more about Steve Furtick today. So we had a video the other day that was kind of short, got cut short, and man, there was a ton of comments, and I want to respond to some of those comments and share some of our subscriber feedback. So this was the video that we shared the other day. And if you want to go back and check out the full video, it's actually not that long. This guy here, Bits of Wisdom, thanks so much for dropping a comment. He says he, meaning Steve Furtick, he says he should give it all away. So we were talking here in this video about money and about Steve going from $0 to $55 million and becoming an absolute celebrity rock star and one of the highest paid pastors in history and all these kind of things. And he has a almost a $3 million house that's 16,000 square feet. Now, congrats to him, I guess. And his son put out a video of him rapping. His son is 16 years old. By the way, this is Steve Furtick's son, who has been on stage at the church, who speaks at the and does openings at the youth ministry stuff. He does stuff at the youth camps. He is on, his parents have him full outright in the forefront of their ministry. He's all over, mom's YouTube page, all this stuff. And, we'll see what happens with him. Anyway, he talks about, in his song that if you mess with him, he'll shoot you because he's carrying a gun, which, by the way, for a 16-year-old in that state is illegal. He talks about licking a girl. He talks about he's a multimillionaire. He talks about he has a $300 pair of jeans, and about driving really fast and going to parties where they're serving Henny and all the stuff. And so anyway, he's 16 years old. And that is what Steve and his wife are supporting. And so Bits came in here and said something really cool. He said, hey man, you should give it all away. He said every single penny just to please God. So basically saying, give every single penny away just to please God and get a free pass to heaven. And then he says, bet he wouldn't, even if God told him to. They're all hypocrites. Okay, so I appreciate the comment, just like all of you. And here's a couple things that I wanted to say to add to the conversation, just for the community. Okay, number one, there's a very, very well-known stat from all kinds of research firms, Barna Institute being one of the biggest ones, that less than 50% of church tithes make it to the field. Okay, in most churches, between 10 and 30% of a dollar, any dollar you give will actually make it into the field. That money is the majority of that money is paid for the staff, the administration, the building, things like that. So it's basically to keep the show going. And in terms of salaries, you have salaries where pastors are literally making millions of dollars off of donations, off of free donations of a 501c3 nonprofit. Okay, so what I would say here is, look, I'm a capitalist, okay? So I get it to some degree. If you were a normal business, if you were an LLC or S Corp or C Corp, I get it, right? Like, I would be for you making as much as you could, and then hopefully providing services that are helping people. But here's the thing: when you are selling what you're selling as, give your money to me, to my church, and you are giving to the kingdom of God. This is how you become a faithful Christian. This is how you further the kingdom, is to give money to us. This is how we will reach the community. This is how we'll do all these things. And this is how we'll reach the world for Jesus. When the reality is, guys, megachurch, the megachurch movement has become all about the stage and the performance and streaming, but it's everything that has to do with the stage. It has nothing to do with what happens when you're off the stage, who you're with, what you're talking about, who you're reaching. And that is why 10-20% for the most part of that money ends up in the field. You're basically paying to make people filthy rich. There are thousands of YouTube videos. I've watched probably 40 or 50 of them in the past year, probably in the past 6 months, of people talking about how they love God, they love Jesus, they served in the church, but they're leaving their church or their mega church. And mostly, I think all the ones I saw were mega churches, people on YouTube, a lot of them crying or whatever, saying, man, I served, I did all this, I did all that. And then I went through some tough times. I got a divorce, whatever. And I went in, I asked the church for a little bit of money, and they were super stingy and they were super mean about it. And they were, almost embarrassing me, for $600 or something. And here are these pastors, rolling out of here with Bentleys, so anyway, it's to me, it's, an alignment of how are you selling it? Okay. And what are you actually doing with that money? Jesus would take 80-90% of that money and put it out in the field. but you will take 80 or 90% of that money and put it in your pocket or in the pocket of other people. And so there's lots of money put into PowerPoints, presentations, marketing, all these kind of things, building the building, keeping it clean, all those kind of things that they want to do and have to do in order to have these churches. But this is fundamentally why the church bubble exists, in my opinion, is because we are not focusing on people, on marriages, on families. And all studies show, and I will go back to this, all studies show when these churches come in, people flood to those churches. The community is not more Christian. They do not act more Christian. They do not have less divorces. Their children grow up following God less in almost every situation. And, the politics in the community, like things don't move more towards Christian morals. And so if, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's an interesting dichotomy, and that is what the church bubble is all about. And I will also leave you on this topic with this to think about, friends. Jesus said that my house has become a marketplace. He said this in John chapter 2, but he says there that my house has become a den of thieves, specifically talking about people would come in to a holy experience in the temple courts of the Old Testament in the Jewish tradition. And what was happening is people were starting to set up booths where they were buying and selling cattle. I don't know if it was actually cattle, but I think it was like goats and things like that, beads, all these things that were superstitions that if you buy here in the court, these are more blessed, they're more holy. You'll get good luck from God, from Jesus, or from, not from Jesus back then, but from God. You'll get, what I'm saying? There were just superstitions. And that is exactly what is happening here, that if you give your money to our church, to our ministry, through our tables, we will, you will live a better life. So you become more superstitious, positively superstitious about your life, or you're supposed to. And I can tell you that, having been on the backside of some of these ministries and seeing how they work and how that all happens, I'm telling you that is absolutely not the case. Okay. So, and I'm not saying that you can't outgive God, or that, I know how somebody's going to turn this and they're going to be like, well, are you saying that if somebody gives, that they're not giving to God, or God won't? No, I'm not saying that. So don't get me wrong. Go back to what I said. What I am saying directly is, how is it pitched and what happens to that money? End of story. That is what I'm saying. That's the bottom line. And then when you align that, the reality of the answer to the Bible and to what Jesus said the problem was, you tell me where we're at. Okay. So as good and awesome as many people we stream to, and as big as these sanctuaries are, and as amazing as the preaching is, and as amazing as the worship is, the reality and the facts are what they are. I've known this for 20 years, and that's why I finally had the guts to start this channel. And honestly, I think that's why this channel is blowing up, is because we are finally addressing things like this. Okay. Number 2. Okay, so Rock Solid here. He had a very, very good, well thought through argument here. So he had a comment on the same video, and he says, so in the video, I talked about transfer growth. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically people, there's stats out now in the church where people know that churches don't actually lead more people to God in any way. In fact, maybe 1% to 3% of people who attend actually became a Christian as a part of that church. Most of all growth now is people transferring from one church to the other, and so anyway, so it's funny because the church will say we're having revival when all they're doing is getting people from all the other churches to come over to their church. So, okay. So he says this, he says, I do think some of the transfer growth data is misinterpreted. So he's talking about the data that is from the surveys. He says, in many cases, it's not quote, active disciples who are leaving one fellowship community and being lured by the mega church, but being lured to another church, essentially. So he says, no, it's people who are inactive at their former congregations. That's absolutely true. Then the infrequent attendees and it says, and they were virtually non-supporters. So their time, talents, they're probably not tithing or tithing less. He says the number of disaffected Christians is staggering. Okay. So I would say this is obvious. Okay. The people who are leaving are not the people who are so satisfied They're not the 2 to 5%, which is the actual data point that I want to be clear on here, because he's making a delineation between those who are serious and those that are not. Okay. The percentage of people in any church, whether it's 10 people, whether it's 100,000 people, is a very small percentage of people. And that is why they all know each other, because it is a small group of people. Okay. I've been in churches that were 4, 5, 6,000 people, and the nucleus of that church was like 20, 25, 30 people. The people who are in the inner core, in the inner circle, yeah, of course, those people are generally not leaving. But I will tell you this, and this is something that you should think about also, rock solid. And anybody out there who might think this, there's more and more data showing and more testimonials of people showing that it is the inner circle people now who are more frustrated than ever before. And there are tons and tons of churches that are having this problem, where people who've been in the ministry, served for 10 years, served for 8 years, given tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to the church, those people are leaving and are dissatisfied. So I don't think that this is exclusive in any way. In fact, I would say that the trend is clearly going in the opposite direction, that there are more people who are more serious in the church that become dissatisfied once they start seeing what's happening on the backside of the ministry, and that is becoming more about a person or their personality, or how big they can get, versus reaching people. So I understand where he's coming from, but that's my my opinion there. Would love to hear if you guys what you think. Okay, so he also says here, when viewed from this perspective, the transfer growth isn't stealing members, it's revitalizing them. Okay, maybe. So he says it's taking people who are just names on the church roll and re-energizing them. Now you can make a good argument as to whether or not, okay, so we're basically on the same opinion on the rest of this stuff. He's likewise, you can question the depth of the teaching, blah, 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 but it is clear that they are attending in a massive church more frequently, and they did not in their former congregations. So that has to count for something. So I want to address this last part of this, because this was what's on top of my mind. So this idea that with Christians that, like, we can always go to the lowest common denominator, which is, hey, at least somebody's hearing the word of God. Okay. See, that is exactly what's happening in Jesus's day, where he would go into the temple, and all these people who were in the temple buying and selling and doing all this stuff were saying, hey man, well, at least they're in the presence of God. At least we're bringing people into the temple. These are people who would not probably come in here, come into the temple, be next to the Holy of Holies, be next to the presence of God. And so therefore, because they are kind of close, because they're at least here, at least we're doing something. When in fact, you are denying the fact that you are profiting and you are building a marketplace. You are what Jesus called a den of thieves. I get it. On one hand, it's like, hey, at least somebody's hearing blah, blah, but I'm just telling you guys, they can at least just hear the blah, blah, blah from their phone. They can at least just hear God from sitting in their car, at least just hear God from being on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? So like, to me, that's not a justification for anything, and is very, very common that I hear kind of what I would call like super Christians say that, okay, or try to use that as a justification. I've heard a lot of pastors, when I've had this whole church bubble discussion with them, they always fall back on that. Well, dude, at least people are in the building. I'm like, bro, go back to what Jesus said about when people were in the temple courts. And you tell me if just being in the courtyard, just being in the temple courts, just being a butt in seats is in any way a reflection of their status with God or how they live, because the reality is it is. Let me come back here to the transfer growth topic. Okay. So the transfer growth topic, so he's saying that these people are leaving one area, and that they're kind of the downtrodden, and then they're being revitalized. Okay. So I would say this, I definitely agree that when they go to a new church, they are revitalized. Obviously, they are going to a new church. Okay, it doesn't is not actually an indication in any way that they are attending more, giving more, doing whatever. In fact, a lot of these people are just what's called church hoppers. They're just hopping churches. Okay, so I don't think there's in any way a validation of that. Could that actually happen? Absolutely. Do we all have a couple stories we probably know? Probably. Okay. Now, what I do want to say, and I want to make this very, very clear, guys. None of this argument, and it's just discussion, right? But none of this this point of view, it still doesn't undercut the idea of the church bubble. Let's say this is all happening. Let's say people are leaving a church that they don't attend, they don't like, and they go to another church, and they weren't tithing at the other one for the past 6 months, and they go to the next one, and they're giving, and they're doing all this stuff, and they're in the ministries, and they're doing all the, they're attending. Okay, the fact that we have boiled down Christianity and good, faithful Christians to the rating system of your attendance, your butts in seats, your faithfulness to the ministry, which is really, I'm just being real, which is really you being a yes man. Okay. Because the moment you say something could be wrong, should do better, in most churches, not all, I definitely know some that are open to it, but in most churches, they don't want to hear it. They don't have time for you. They're not looking for that. Okay. So as long as you want to be a yes man and come in there, then they're good. Here's my point. Just because you're doing all that, you're involved in the youth ministry of the new church, and everyone's going, man, Susie got revitalized for Jesus. You know, oh, Susie met a new person at the new church, and Susie's going to heaven now. And Susie, you know, God hooked her up with a new spouse, and I'm happy for Susie. I'm going, Susie, go girl. But here's my point: the church is not impacting the community more. The children are not living for Jesus more. They're living less for God every generation. The way we live, the way we talk, the way we communicate, the way we manage people at work, the way we run our businesses, the politics, it's all going to the crapper. So does anybody want to have that argument? And I find it interesting that the reason why this church channel is growing is because we address that. We bring it to the forefront. Not saying we're trying to be critical on pastors. I know I get that rap a little bit. Definitely get that rap a little bit. And that's okay. Because you know who else is critical? That one dude who walked in to the temple and started taking people's money bags, dumping them on the ground. He started taking their tables, flipping them over. Oh yeah, that guy's name was Jesus. So anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know. See you on the next one. I'll be here every single day. Every day, guys. Check your video feed. Talk to you soon. Love you guys.